Martha Ellison never imagined she would be in such a situation. At 68 years old, she led a quiet life in the small town of Dalton, in a silent and family-oriented neighborhood where she knew every neighbor by name. Her routine consisted of taking care of the garden, visiting the grocery store of her old friend Mr. Morris, and spending afternoons leafing through old photo albums on the porch of the house where she had grown up. Martha had few luxuries, but many memories, especially of her late father, Joseph Hayes, a man known for his honesty and simplicity. On that sunny June day, however, nothing seemed calm. Martha was about to enter the city courthouse to defend, on her own, the family home against a financial giant. 6 months earlier, a letter sealed with a legal stamp had changed her life forever. The notice was clear and cold. The house that had belonged to her father for more than 5 decades was in the process of foreclosure. In that moment, Martha felt as if the ground had disappeared from under her feet. With the initial help of a local lawyer, who soon afterward had given up in the face of the case's complexity, she discovered that there was something very strange about that charge. Determined not to lose her father's only physical legacy, Martha did the unthinkable. She spent the last few months obsessively studying every detail of the law on mortgages and foreclosures. Now, in front of the imposing courthouse building, with documents carefully organized under her arm, she took a deep breath and slowly climbed the steps, feeling the weight of the entire town watching her bowed but determined back. As soon as Martha entered the courtroom, she immediately felt the heavy, intimidating atmosphere hanging in the air. The high walls, paneled with dark, polished wood, seemed to press down on her, stifling any courage she might still have left. Judge Raymond Fulton, a robust man known in town for his impatience and cutting sarcasm, was seated behind a huge elevated table with a distant and indifferent gaze. To his right sat Victor Langley, the lawyer for the corporation attempting to take Martha's family home. Langley was tall and thin, with perfectly combed back hair, and wore an impeccable dark gray suit whose appearance conveyed confidence and authority. As he casually flipped through the folder in front of him, he discreetly smiled upon noticing Martha approach alone, without representation, clearly underestimating the woman before him. Langley was the first to stand to present the case, his voice echoing firmly throughout the room. In an indifferent tone, he argued that the case was simply a natural consequence of Joseph Hayes' financial irresponsibility. He claimed that all legal procedures had been followed to the letter, and emphasized that Martha was wasting the precious time of the court. Each of his words hit Martha like a blow, but she maintained a firm expression, patiently waiting her turn. When Langley finished, casting her an almost amused look, Judge Fulton turned to Martha with an bored sigh, clearly expecting an emotional and poorly articulated speech. However, Martha rose with dignity, adjusted her slightly trembling glasses, and to everyone's surprise, began speaking with impressive clarity and firmness. Her voice, although calm, was imbued with an unexpected authority, and every word seemed to carry the strength she had gathered during months of solitary, tireless preparation. When Martha opened her folder and calmly removed 2 sheets carefully protected by plastic, silence took over the courtroom. She slowly raised the documents, making it clear she was not there to waste anyone's time. "Your Honor, this document here," Martha said slowly, pointing to the first sheet, "is the original contract that my father signed almost 20 years ago. Now see this," she continued, showing the second paper, "a document that, according to the bank, he recently signed, agreeing to a modification of the mortgage." Saying this, Martha fixed her steady eyes on Langley, who was already beginning to lose his air of superiority. Martha continued confidently, "Examine the signatures carefully. They are clearly different. My father would never sign in that manner. I knew him so well that I could recognize his handwriting with my eyes closed. Moreover, this second signature bears a peculiar date. It was made exactly 1 day after my father suffered a severe stroke, which left him incapacitated. He would never have had the physical condition to hold a pen, let alone sign any document." The energy in the room changed dramatically. Langley, who seconds before had maintained an arrogant and mocking posture, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, repeatedly glancing at Judge Fulton for a reaction. Fulton, who had previously shown little interest, now leaned over the table, scrutinizing the documents presented by Martha with attentive eyes. It was evident that Martha's strategy had hit its mark. Seizing this moment of impact, Martha continued in a firm yet controlled voice. "Based on this evidence, I officially request that the court require the bank to present the original contract for a detailed forensic evaluation. If they are telling the truth, they will surely have no problem presenting it. Otherwise, we are facing a clear fraud, not only against my father, but possibly against many other innocent people who, out of fear or lack of knowledge, were unable to fight back. With that, Martha concluded her statement, feeling her heart beating as strongly as a drum in her chest. She knew she had taken a decisive step, but also understood that the real battle was far from over. Victor Langley was visibly shaken by Martha's unexpected presentation. He quickly tried to regain his composure, adjusting his tie with trembling fingers, and cast a cold, furious look at his assistant, who was nervously fiddling with her notebook behind him. The lawyer stood up abruptly, coughing discreetly before speaking, clearly trying to buy time to regain control of the situation. His voice, once calm and assured, now sounded somewhat hesitant and defensive. Your Honor, these allegations are absurd. My client is a reputable financial institution that would never engage in something as low as document forgery. This is a very serious and unfounded accusation that must be treated with extreme care. Langley paused briefly, as if choosing his words, and then added in a harsher tone, the complainant is obviously confused and emotionally affected by the family situation. We cannot allow unfounded speculations to tarnish the impeccable reputation of the institution I represent. However, Langley's attempt to downplay the accusation did not convince Judge Fulton, who now was clearly interested in the matter presented by Martha. The judge's expression had become stern, his raised eyebrow clearly indicating that he was deeply reflecting on what he had just heard. Dr. Langley, Fulton began firmly, the accusations made by Mrs. Ellison are too serious to be dismissed without careful analysis. The signature, especially on such a critical document, must be verified with extreme rigor. Therefore, I formally order the banking institution to provide this court with the original document of the mortgage modification within 72 hours. Otherwise, this court will have sufficient grounds to believe in the existence of a deliberate fraud and will immediately initiate the appropriate measures. Langley opened his mouth to protest, but a severe look from the judge made him retreat, swallowing hard. Martha, for her part, felt a momentary relief mixed with a new tension. She knew that the next step would be crucial. The clock of justice had begun to run, and at that moment, Martha understood that her fight was not only for her father's house, but also against a system used to winning by force, not by truth. The courtroom fell silent as the judge struck the gavel, setting the deadline for the submission of the original documents. Langley slowly sat down, almost defeated, and began to type something frantically on his phone, probably trying to contact his team for a quick maneuver. Martha sat down again calmly, feeling a deep yet temporary relief. Around her, people whispered in admiration, casting curious glances in her direction, intrigued by the surprising strength of the simple woman who had dared to challenge giants. Even so, Martha did not smile or celebrate. Her gaze remained fixed on a distant point, aware that she had not yet completely won. In her heart, anxiety and hope mingled as she thought of her father, the family legacy, and the countless other silent victims of the same system. She knew that now she had a greater responsibility. She needed to definitively prove the fraud, so that no one else would suffer the same ordeal. That afternoon, Martha returned home with the feeling of carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. The old house, the scene of her happiest memories, suddenly seemed vulnerable. Walking slowly through the silent rooms, she observed every piece of furniture, every faded photograph, every small detail that had gone unnoticed for years. She stopped in front of an old photo, which showed her father as a young man, with a shy smile, holding her in his arms when she was a child. A lump tightened her throat as she imagined how hard he had fought to build that space, brick by brick, working day and night to ensure the family's comfort. She sat in his favorite armchair, still smelling the familiar scent of his pipe ingrained in the upholstery. In that moment, Martha fully understood what was at stake. It was not just a legal battle, but a fight for dignity, for memory, and for truth. Determined, she stood up, wiped the silent tears streaming down her face, and returned to her desk piled with papers and law books. The fight was not over. It was only just beginning. The following 72 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Martha barely slept, studying every line of her documents and meticulously preparing to face any eventuality. When she returned to the courthouse, she found a completely different scene. The room was packed. It seemed that all of Dalton had heard about the case and wanted to witness the outcome. Langley was already there, looking exhausted and dejected, surrounded by a team of lawyers who whispered nervously among themselves. Martha noticed that the arrogant posture he had displayed so confidently days before was now absent. Judge Fulton entered quickly, dispensing with formalities, visibly irritated by any delay that might arise. As he sat down, he immediately fixed his gaze on Langley and, with a serious and incisive expression, asked, "Did you bring the original document, Mr. Langley?" The silence was suffocating. All eyes were focused on the lawyer, who fumbled with papers uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for that critical moment. Langley took a deep breath, stood up with difficulty, and began speaking slowly, avoiding eye contact with both Martha and the judge. "Your Honor, unfortunately, we were unable to locate the original document in time," he said in an almost inaudible voice, while the room filled with murmurs of astonishment. "However, we request an additional deadline, as we believe this to be a simple, unintentional administrative error." The judge interrupted with a sharp knock on the table, abruptly halting Langley's feeble speech. "I am not interested in bureaucratic excuses, Doctor. This court's order was explicit," replied Fulton, in a harsh voice that allowed no rebuttal. Before he could finish his sentence, an unexpected sound made everyone quickly look back. The heavy door of the courthouse creaked open slowly, revealing an elderly, thin, and visibly frail man, leaning with difficulty on an old dark wooden cane. Martha felt her heart stop for a moment, and her hands began to tremble. She could not believe what she saw. Before everyone's eyes, standing, firm and resolute despite his physical frailty, was her father, Joseph Hayes, alive and determined, directly confronting the lawyer who had so underestimated both his daughter and his family. Joseph Hayes's unexpected presence completely froze the courtroom. Martha instinctively stood up almost without realizing it, her teary eyes fixed on her father. Everyone believed that Joseph was either unable to move or even dead. Even Langley had built his entire defense on that premise. But there he was, silently defying all medical and legal prognoses, facing everyone with an almost palpable courage. Joseph slowly advanced until he reached Martha, who ran to support him by the arm. No words needed to be exchanged between them. The firm grip of her father's trembling hand said it all. Joseph's gaze fixed directly on Victor Langley, with a calm yet forceful expression that seemed to demand explanations. Langley, unable to hide the despair on his now pale face, remained motionless, while his aides exchanged nervous glances and frantic whispers, searching for a quick reaction. Joseph, with his weak but audible voice, slowly addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I would just like to say something. I have never seen this second contract before. I never signed that paper. That signature is not mine, and I am here before you to prove that I would never have agreed to risk the house I built for my family." The man's voice echoed clearly, even trembling with weakness, causing a profound impact on everyone present. Martha watched the scene with a mix of indescribable pride and emotion, silent tears streaming down her tired cheeks. Judge Fulton immediately turned to Langley, demanding explanations. "Doctor, Langley, do you have anything further to say in light of the situation?" Victor tried to stammer out something coherent, but all that came out were short, disjointed phrases. Finally, he lowered his head in silence, defeated and aware of the gravity of the situation. Fulton then declared firmly, "This court will immediately initiate a formal investigative process regarding this alleged document fraud. All activities related to the foreclosure of Joseph Hayes's house are suspended until everything is thoroughly clarified." With that, the judge struck the gavel decisively, officially marking the start of the investigations, while Martha embraced her father, knowing that his courage had changed everything forever. When the proceedings ended, the assembled crowd took a long time to disperse. It was as if everyone had just witnessed something extraordinary, a historic moment that no one would ever forget. Martha held her father's arm firmly, helping him walk out of the room, while people who had once been mere spectators discreetly congratulated her for what had just happened. Among the whispers, Martha caught words like incredible, justice, courage, and for the first time she truly felt the impact of what she had done. She, a woman without any legal training, without resources, without influential allies, had managed to dismantle a farce built by one of the largest law firms in the state. And above all, she had done it cleanly, using only the power of truth and the strength of determination. Outside, under the hot afternoon sun, Martha paused for a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She had won the battle, but she knew the war was not yet completely over. The case would now proceed to a deeper investigation, and Langley, along with his corporate clients, would face charges that could shake the entire system of unjust foreclosures in the region. But at that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that her father was still by her side, that the family home continued to be theirs, and that she had proven to herself and to the world that even in the face of the worst adversities, the truth always finds a way to emerge. With a discreet smile, she turned to her father and said softly, "Let's go home, Dad." Joseph nodded with a look full of pride and relief, and arm in arm, the two walked down the street, knowing that regardless of what lay ahead, they would never be silenced again.